Alright, let's go. The playoffs are here and we got a rematch from week 1 between the Eagles and Packers. But with that being so long ago, what's changed and is there anything the teams can take away from Brazil? Plus DeVonta Smith and AJ Brown are good to go after missing some practices. However, Green Bay is a little more uncertain, with a couple guys questionable to play. So let's take a look at how that might impact the game as well as which matchups are the biggest ones ahead of the wildcard game, and why Philly might have a slight advantage. But first, let's run it. Alright, this is kind of crazy and also really awesome, but thanks to the official sponsor of the channel, you could get tickets to watch the Eagles play in the playoffs. So listen up, here's all you gotta do. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and then hit the like button on your way down to the comments. Or next, just enter the name of the player you think will score the first touchdown in the Eagles-Packers game, because if you get that right and the Birds win, I'm going to give away 2 tickets to one person who got their prediction right via the randomized spinner at the end of the game stream on Sunday. So good luck to you guys, and thanks again to Underdog for the insane partnership. Of course, that's not all, since as the official sponsor of the show, when you scan the QR code and use my code PHILLYSPECIAL, you can get a special pick in the lobby and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Heck, with the NFL playoffs in full swing, the bonuses, promos, and multipliers are just getting bigger and bigger. For example, take this 50% boost I just got on the app. Like normally this thing would be like a 5-pick, maybe 10x play. However, I'm able to make the selection and then add the token to turn it into a 15x play. By the way, for those curious, I'm going to go with Saquon Barkley as the first touchdown scorer. After all, he was the first one to score in Brazil, and now he's coming off of some valuable rest along with the hype of playing in front of the Philly crowd.
The home games here are electric, so my expectation for a first home game, I don't really know how much further they can take it, playing against them on the other side, and then playing a Monday night here, playing a Thursday night here, playing Sunday. It's like the way that they show up to games and how amazing our fan base are is out of this world. Anytime you can get rest and let your body recover a little bit, it definitely helps. But it's a good thing because we were able to put ourselves in a position where we were able to rest and get ourselves prepared for this run. But the focus go to Green Bay and the week of preparation that we've had. And I think we've had a great week of preparation up to this point. And wrapping up these next two or 3 days so we can finish strong.
Oh yeah, one more thing. You know the Eagles and Packers are top 5 in terms of rushing attempts, so you know they're not going to shy away from running the football. Which is why for my picks, I'm going to go with the Saquon anytime touchdown like I mentioned, Josh Jacobs to get over 69 rushing yards, and then I'm going to take Jalen Hurts to get at least 213 passing yards, as well as Jayden Reed to get more than 5 targets. And finally, Jordan Love will end up throwing an interception for the first time in 7 games. As always, I got the link to tell these plays down in the pinned comments of this video, so feel free to play along, then come hang out on the game stream with us so we can sweat out the picks together. Remember, just scan the QR code, use my code PHILLYSPECIAL, click the link in the description, you can get up to $1,000 bonus cash and join the best option in fantasy sports.
Show me the money!
Alright, speaking of bonus money, Zack Baun is about to get paid. For real, the dude just became the first Eagles All-Pro linebacker in 25 years. And the best part is that it wasn't even close, with Baun leading all linebackers in All-Pro votes by a decent margin. In fact, only 2 defensive players got more first-team votes than Baun, and that would be the Cleveland Browns' Myles Garrett and Patrick Surtain with the Denver Broncos. That's it. That's the list. Like, talk about coming out of nowhere and reviving your career. Seriously, this was a guy that New Orleans barely even used. Heck, Howie Roseman just had the idea to add him as a depth signing at the edge. Yet kudos to Vic Fangio, because him seeing it differently now means the Eagles have just their 5th ever first-team All-Pro linebacker. Okay, think about this. The only other linebackers to win first-team All-Pro in Philly are Jeremiah Trotter in 2000, Bill Bergey twice in 1974 and 75, Maxie Baun, and of course Chuck Bednarik 6 times. Come on, I mean, that's just insane. But shout out to Anthony DeBona for asking Zack Baun about how the change of scenery helped him get to this point.
It's cool because I was a special teams guy, obviously, and had to grind my way to where I'm at now. But what was consistent, has been consistent, is the work I put in. The work never stopped, no matter what situation I was in. Whether I was playing special teams, playing a few snaps a game, like I was preparing like I was a starter. I'm practicing like I'm a starter. I'm learning, constantly learning, and I'm going to continue to learn. And then sometimes it's just about fit for guys. And I just wonder how many guys out there are like me and maybe that linebacker or other positions that just need a new place and a fresh start.
I think we all know that Howie Roseman hasn't necessarily valued the linebacker position up to this point, but I can really never see a way now that he's going to let a first-team All-Pro linebacker walk out of the building.
Pay that man his money.
I'm with you, but it is going to be a lot. Granted, Baun's earned it, and he's going to get another chance to add to that payday against the Packers. All right, you guys know because we talked about it multiple times, but Green Bay is 100% a run-first offense. And like Johnny Page pointed out, they do a good job marrying the run game to the pass game with frequent backside bubble screens, which in turn puts the linebackers in a bind. Like, let's not forget, that's one of the reasons the Packers had so much success against Philly in Week 1, running for 163 yards on a 7.8 yards per rush clip. Of course, yes, Week 1 is Week 1 and everyone is still figuring things out. But I will say, either way, if Baun and Nakobe Dean aren't minding their P's and Q's, the trickery can start to open up big plays in the run, and probably more dangerously in the passing game. Still, be that as it may, Nakobe Dean is hyped to take on Josh Jacobs again.
Josh Jacobs was one of the guys that when I was in college, I was like, man, I love to play him just because he's such a physical running back. So being able to play him and see how physical he is and how hard he runs, he just kind of, it's just like something that I was looking forward to. Now I get to play him again. Playoff football is going to be cold. It's going to be grimy. They're a good running team. He's one of the best backs in the league, so I couldn't ask for nothing more.
It's easy to get overshadowed by an all-pro linebacker, but if Nakobe locks up Jacobs, then this thing's a wrap. Or at least a whole lot more difficult for Matt LaFleur's offense. Now sure, the ultimate Swiss Army knife is probably Jayden Reed, with the slot receiver racking up 171 total yards and 2 touchdowns in the opener versus Philly. Again, this is a guy they love to use on bubble screens, jet sweeps, as well as taking deep shots. And considering they'll be without Christian Watson since he tore his ACL, it does feel like Reed's going to get plenty of targets. However, where that could play right into the Eagles' benefit is while Jordan Love can make some impressive throws, he can also get way too aggressive at times. Plus, even though Love took advantage in Week 1 with some big plays, the Birds didn't have Cooper DeJean yet. And to further go into those numbers, 3 of the 4 worst performances from this defense were before the bye week, aka before DeJean took over for Avonte Maddox in the slot. There's a reason Coop finished 3rd in all-pro voting for slot corners. Heck, Fangio's defense was allowing the 2nd most yards per target and the most touchdowns before switching to the Rook, where now they're not only the number 1 defense in the league, but they allow the least amount of yards to slot receivers. I'm just saying, the Pack didn't get a really good feel for how great this defense actually is on Week 1, so it could be a long day for them. Just again, start by shutting down the run. Granted, it's the same thing on the other side. And ironically, Green Bay's got their own Cooper who could be a game changer in rookie Edgerrin Cooper. Remember, the dude only played a handful of snaps early in the season, but has come on lately to really start shutting down the run, leading to being graded as the 4th best linebacker in the league over the last several weeks. And let's just say Cooper's definitely looking forward to the matchup with Saquon, saying, "I'd like to show the world I'm different and show them what I do." Now, I think everyone can appreciate the confidence, but it's a little bit different trying to shut down Saquon Barkley, who, by the way, also won first-team All-Pro honors for the first time in his career, receiving 48 of 50 votes. Heck, going up against the Baltimore Ravens at the time, the NFL's best run defense, still couldn't stop Saquon as he ended up getting 107 yards on 23 carries. So not exactly sure what the Packers are going to do. However, for those counting, the Packers haven't allowed a 75-yard rusher since Week 8. And shout out to Johnny Page for this, but it's typically been with just 4-man fronts and a light box, thanks to some good linebacker play and one of the best edge run defenders in the league in Rashawn Gary. But again, as I say that, I don't know that the Cheeseheads are going to have a lot of success with a light box against Saquon. Either way, the biggest area to exploit is throwing over the middle of the field, which on one hand isn't exactly what the Eagles' offense does much. Not that you needed to be told this, but Jalen has the 2nd lowest rate in the NFL when it comes to pushing the ball down the field in between the numbers. Of course, yes, just because he doesn't do it much doesn't mean he's not successful at it. Actually, it's the opposite of that, with QB1 having the best EPA in the league when throwing over the middle. So I don't know, even though they didn't do that early on, perhaps we see a different Kellen Moore passing attack from Jalen.
We're not the same team that they saw in Brazil in terms of how efficient we've been in the run, how deadly Saquon has been, and how we've been able to play really good defense. And so, it'll be a great challenge for us seeing a different team, if you will, but also them seeing a different team as well. And we got to go out there and compete and play good ball.
Look, it's been nearly a full month since Jalen's played a full game. Although when we look at that game versus the Steelers, that was his best passing performance maybe the entire season. And no surprise, but Jalen used the entire field, including the middle, which is why I'd say my personal preference would be to get the passing game going early, let Jalen get in a rhythm, and then run with Saquon to finish off the Packers late in the game. Behind the best offensive line in football that somehow didn't end up getting a single first-team All-Pro. Yeah, I don't know how that makes sense. But still, congrats to Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata and A.J. Brown for making the second team. And not that they needed it, yet I can appreciate the fact that someone taped an all-pro comparison of Lane Johnson's stats next to Penei Sewell of the Lions for some extra motivation.
That's all I needed. That's all I needed for him to do that. And it became personal with me.
Lane's the best offensive lineman in the NFL. I have no doubt about that.
Honestly, if anything, let him keep doing this because the team really plays better whenever something like this happens. Now, speaking of playing, while DeVonta Smith missed Friday's practice due to some back tightness, he was listed without a designation and will for sure be a go on Sunday. And the same thing for A.J. Brown, who actually got in a full practice on Friday to work with Jalen. So good news there, and all 22 will be starting for Philly. However, for the Packers, they have several defensive players listed as questionable and will be a little thin in the secondary with safety depth. Anyway, with that being the case and all the other news, I had Eagles writer Anthony DeBona hop on to discuss how much of a difference that could make, as well as preview everything else ahead of the wildcard matchup. DeVonta Smith misses practice yesterday on Friday due to some back tightness. A.J. Brown had missed some practice. He did get in a full practice there. But any concerns? I mean, we got Jalen Hurts also with the concussion. He's good, but, him getting back receivers-wise now, there's just a little bit of anxiety around the air, it feels like, within Philly. But any major concerns? Should we be really issue on that side, or you think they're going to be okay?
I think they'll be all right. I mean, it's fair to wonder at this point of the season when you see anybody on the injury report, especially given how we've seen the Eagles kind of deal with injuries throughout the year. Some guys pop up out of nowhere. Next thing you know, they're out of the game. But it seems like, especially after resting in Week 18, these guys will be good to go. And it's kind of the plan that they have had set in place to kind of allow these guys to have a little bit more rest heading into the playoffs and a huge matchup where the Eagles are going to really need all of them.
Absolutely. And you actually brought up a couple different great stats. If you're not following already, you should be following Anthony at DeBona NFL. But what was the stat again? They've had 4 games, I believe, with DeVonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, and A.J. Brown on the field. But there's some, I guess, good chemistry, good karma when they're all on the field playing together.
So I got 2 stats here. So the Eagles are 4-0 in games started by A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. They didn't even have to finish those games. They just started them together. And then another one is the Eagles are 9-0 in games where Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, and DeVonta Smith both started and finished the game. So that's not counting that Washington game where they lost Jalen Hurts, obviously, to the concussion. But it seems like if those guys are able to stay on the field, or even in the case of Brown, Smith, and Goddard, if they even just start the game, the Eagles are undefeated. So that's certainly trending in the right direction heading into this game in the playoffs.
So you're telling me there's a chance. I like those odds. I like the numbers, getting the guys together. They haven't had as much, as you mentioned, the 4 games on the field together. But, the chemistry, maybe get things right. Jalen Hurts, as we mentioned, too, coming off the concussion. We've talked about it a couple different times offline and the past week of recording. Like, do we think there's going to be some rust? Is there going to be any issues there? How are you feeling given Jalen Hurts and the delay coming back? He said that he doesn't really, buy into any of the rust. I know that you dispelled some of the anxieties on the last recording that we did, but any changes from what we've heard of practice, seeing him get in some work, a colder weather game, Packers defense potentially banged up there, but thoughts on Jalen and how he's coming back?
So just in case anybody missed that previous video, I'll run back those stats about Jalen Hurts when he's had more than at least a week off, whether it was due to a bye week or due to injury. The Eagles are 6-2 in those games. Jalen Hurts has 11 passing touchdowns, so just 5 interceptions, and he also has 8 rushing touchdowns in those games. So I know people have said I guess falsely said that Jalen Hurts kind of has rust and struggles a lot after an extended period of time off, but the Eagles win 75% of their games in those scenarios, and he seems to be doing well. But in regards to this last week, I think the biggest thing, and maybe why they kind of drew out this whole process with the concussion protocol, was because he also was dealing with that broken finger in his non-throwing hand. And sure enough, now we see it, and I tweeted about it, that it didn't look like he had that big bulky splint on it that he had when he played a couple weeks ago, and now he's still wearing the glove. Maybe he has some type of sleeve or bandage on it, but it's not the big bulky apparatus that he had in there before. So it seemed like these 2 weeks off, obviously it helped with the concussion, but you have to take his finger into account as well, because there was even a play where he had to hand it off with the wrong hand, where normally he would have handed it off with his left hand. So it clearly played a factor. He said it was bothering him at times, but obviously he doesn't have to throw with that hand. So, but as far as the way that he carries the ball and hands it off, it did have an impact, but now it seems like that will help moving forward.
Should be good to go. 100%. Packers also dealing with, some minor quarterback injury. I don't know to what extent, because Matt LaFleur very much like Sirianni, trying to keep the competitive advantage. Jordan Love going, hopefully, just kind of playing coy with the media and everything else there. Got in some full practices. Definitely will be good to go. I'm not sure that it was even as much of a concern as what they were playing earlier on the week, but, nonetheless, it's playoffs. You try to keep things close to the vest, I suppose. There are other injuries as well. Any major concerns or just noteworthy ones for you that stick out?
I mean, the other one you have to mention is just Jair Alexander, who's been ruled out for a week or two now, but he was their top cornerback. He's had a couple good battles against the Eagles, and A.J. Brown got the better of him early in the season, but he's still their top cornerback. So the fact that he won't be in there for them is a huge blow to their pass defense. They have a couple guys that have stepped up in his absence, but without Alexander, their pass defense has kind of dove off a cliff. And I believe I read a stat somewhere where I believe they were 6-1 with him in the lineup this season or something like that, and then 5-5 without him. The numbers could be off, but it's a huge impact that he's had on their defense and the team as a whole. So that's another notable injury that you have to look at for this matchup.
For sure. There's also, again, I have to also similarly go back, but it was something to the effect of their pass defense is like top 3 or 4 in defensive efficiency when he's on the field versus like 23rd whenever he's off of it. So, naturally you have a player go out like that, going to affect things, but you start to see a decent amount of times where they play too high safety. And considering, you got Saquon Barkley coming into town, the thought of, do you try to limit him? And if you make it a too high safety approach, well then, all right, good luck if you're not going to try to load the box or at least limit in some way. Granted, Green Bay's been, they've been solid. They've been since, I think, week 8. They haven't allowed more than a 75-yard rusher since week 8. So it speaks for itself. They've been better than they were earlier on in the season. But, it's one thing to go, well, they haven't allowed 75 yards. Another thing to say, they're going to shut down Saquon Barkley because they've seen what the Eagles did against, the Baltimore Ravens, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just name whatever defense that people are like, oh, well, just wait till you play those guys. And Saquon has done it time and time again. So I'm excited. I'm hopeful. I can't wait to see what this team does. We talked about it last week as well, how the rest is impactful and how it changes things. But you hear Saquon Barkley saying it too, like, I feel good, I feel fresh, rested. Same thing for the O-line. What are your expectations? Do you feel like that the Eagles go into this thing before, and we'll get into the full preview, but just expectation, you think they lean on the running game early, or do you think that they go pass approach first and then, late in the game whenever the defense is tired, then say, all right, here's Saquon Barkley, try to stop him?
Well, I think when you factor in that kind of Jalen Hurts has had a couple weeks off, I think they will lean on the pass a little bit earlier, especially with Alexander out of the lineup for the Packers, because if you look back, especially at that week 1 matchup, they were trying to push the ball down the field, but Hurts made a few mistakes that he probably wants back. And if you look at that game as a whole, he had 2 interceptions and 1 lost fumble in that week 1 matchup. And then since then, in the 14 games that he's played, he has just 3 interceptions and 1 lost fumble. So that one game was kind of out of the ordinary for Hurts as a whole for this season. And Jordan Love has kind of had a similar trajectory, which I'm sure we'll talk about, where he was turning the ball over at a high rate for the first half of the season, but he's kind of been able to reel that back in and take care of the football in recent weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how the quarterbacks do in that regard. But I think early in the game, they are going to lean on the passing game, try to attack those cornerbacks without Alexander there. And you'll see A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith, and obviously now Dallas Goedert back in the mix as well. So even Saquon Barkley, he caught a touchdown through the air in that game as well. So maybe we'll see Saquon Barkley featured more as a receiver in this game. But I think they'll lean on that approach to begin with, because I know Saquon Barkley eclipsed 100 yards in that first game against the Packers, but they didn't really give him much before contact, which is kind of where the Eagles have made a killing this season. They only had 13 rushing yards before contact in that matchup. So Saquon Barkley kind of had to work for his yardage in that game. So I think they'll kind of beat up the Packers through the air to begin the game and then kind of lean on Saquon to take it home at the end.
There you go. I'm really hopeful because, like you say there too, it's like it's the rhythm, get Jalen whether you believe in the rust or not, but just kind of get him in a good flow early on, and then take advantage of it after the fact. Before we get into the full Eagles Packers preview, though, I did want to mention, because the Howie Roseman is always making moves, always trying to make the roster better, doing things a little bit unorthodox at times, surprising, unexpected. Louis Cine was signed by the Eagles. It's a little bit unusual this late in the year to make a signing to the roster, especially if you're going to look at, some of the depth they already have on the secondary. But former Georgia Bulldog, former first rounder, drafted by the Minnesota Vikings. Curious your thoughts. I've talked about it a little bit on the show. I've seen your tweets and everything, but for people that may not have read those, gotten a little bit more of your take, do you like the move? Potential of why they made this move? Everything there.
Well, it feels like a move that Howie Roseman would normally make for the practice squad, where we've talked about it, I feel like, every time that they make a move, where he's kind of looking a year or two ahead with those moves, where they kind of use the practice squad as like their developmental league, and not just for this season. If there's an injury, it's kind of guys that they want to side to future reserve contracts once the season is over, and then see what they can do in training camp next season with a full training camp, obviously the preseason, and then moving forward. So, I mean, obviously you mentioned the Georgia connection, and then I actually wanted to text you this. I don't know if I did, but somebody had brought it up to me where the Georgia Bulldogs or the Eagle Bulldogs, whatever you want to call them, they had their Secret Santa that the team kind of recorded and put out there on social media. And one of the gifts that was there was a giant letter C. And Jordan Davis had made something where it was like, this could be a former Bulldog that'll be an Eagle soon or something like that. So maybe he was hinting at this signing. You might have to go back. Maybe it's too much of a reach. But they tried to connect it, and they ended up, I think Nakobe Dean ended up guessing like, oh, it means C for Christmas. But like now that putting two and two together, maybe that was something that they were considering a couple weeks ago before they had the injury to Jalen Hurts or something like that. And now they were finally able to follow through on it. But it is something interesting to look back on and be like, oh, was that them kind of hinting at that? So that's something to keep in mind there.
Okay, I'm gonna have to actually go back and look at that now, because now that you say that, I'm very intrigued. We know that Howie loves all of his Georgia players. And, you know, he said it before, like, hey, you could just go down to Georgia camp and basically make that your entire, you know, NFL draft scouting combine, right? Because you want to draft all of them, I think is what he said, you know, jokingly, of course, but still, he's drafted and taken a lot of Georgia players over the past several years. So they have played very well, guys living up to expectations, surpassing expectations. However, there is one guy in particular, especially when we talk about the defense, that has surpassed everyone's expectations. I don't think anybody would have ever, you and I were fairly high on Zack Baun, but not to the extent of we would have ever been like, hey, this dude's going to be an all-pro this year, right? You just go from the New Orleans Saints playing special teams and very sparingly on defense to starter on the Eagles in a new position, and there you go, make first-team all-pro. I mean, how crazy, how ridiculous is it, the fact that he is an all-pro for one, and then, you know, you just kind of carry it beyond that because you know the contract's coming.
It's insane. I mean, you couldn't have pictured this happening, and it seems like Zack Baun even didn't think it would happen, because he mentioned how he laughed at the Pro Bowl incentive as his contract, and then sure enough, he was named to the Pro Bowl. But now he's first team All Pro, which is basically the highest and I guess the most serious like recognition you can get in the league outside of Defensive Player of the Year, because a lot of people kind of laugh at the Pro Bowl nowadays because it's a dodgeball tournament or whatever they want to call it that basically everybody can get into once they have everybody sit out. So, but being a first team All Pro in his first season as a full-time inside linebacker in the NFL is just absurd. And I feel like I tweeted every week that the Zack Baun's transformation in Philadelphia isn't getting enough recognition, not even from the national media, but from the local media too. It's kind of feel like we've almost been spoiled by his success, where we're just like, yeah, he's really this good. But like when you like zoom out a little bit, it's like, how did this happen? This guy was in the league for 4 years, never really played snaps at inside linebacker, and now he's arguably the best inside linebacker in the NFL. Like he only two players on defense received more first-team All-Pro votes than him, and that was Patrick Surtain, who's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year, and then Myles Garrett. So in that regard, it seems like he's the third best defensive player in the entire NFL this season, which is just insane for a guy that was signed for chump change at this point. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what he gets signed to. I think given that Vic Fangio will be in Philadelphia next season and for the foreseeable future, as long as he wants to be here, it seems, I think he's going to pound the table and kind of tell Howie Roseman, like, hey, I know you don't usually pay linebackers, but this guy's not your average linebacker with what he's allowed the Eagles to do, where they can kind of go from like 4 defensive linemen and 2 linebackers to Zack Baun being able to creep up and play on the edge, and there's really no drop-off. So what he can really do is unlike any other player, and that's why the Eagles will just be forced to write him that blank check and give him whatever he wants.
Absolutely. You don't let a first-team All-Pro walk out of the building. Let's just say that. You know, again, the fact that it's been 25 years, there's only been there was Jeremiah Trotter. I was looking at a list there. The Jeremiah Trotter, Bill Berge, Maxie Baun, and Chuck Bednarik. I think those are the 4, right? There's only, I believe, 4 other guys. He's the 5th one in Eagles history to win All-Pro at the linebacker position. So it's like it doesn't happen. And you definitely don't let that guy out of the building.
And it's only the second in our lifetime, I think, right? Because I think Trotter's probably the only one in mine or your lifetime that's done it. So it's insane. And I just want to also point out that if anybody hasn't seen it by now, I was able to actually interview Zack Baun in the locker room following the game in Week 18. So that was kind of cool, because it seemed like by the time we had access to the locker room, a lot of the starters that didn't even dress for the game or whatever were way out of there. They didn't stick around. Nobody really stuck around in the locker room. So it was kind of cool for Zack Baun to take time and answer a few questions, especially for, I guess, a little guy like me. It was kind of cool. And it was really cool to hear him talk about how he's kind of feels like he wonders how many other people, whether they're linebackers or other positions, because I asked him about how important fit and things like that are for any player in professional sports. And he kind of said like how well he's always worked and how that's kind of paid off. But at the same time, his mind does wonder about how many other players that are in the right place right now or dealing with the right coach, and if they ever will kind of reach their potential like Baun has in Philadelphia. So it was really cool to kind of see him take all that into perspective and kind of review his first season in Philadelphia.
I loved getting to get the behind the scenes from your videos there, and same thing for the Cooper DeJean, which I'm sure that lots of people have already seen. Again, if you've not, make sure to follow Anthony at DeBona NFL. But you'd asked Coop what was the welcome to the NFL moment. He says the Adam Thielen. He's like, he gave me some work, which, we all remember that game. It was a little bit closer than it needed to be, but appreciate him being willing to, honest on it. And yeah, hey, you know what, Adam Thielen made me better. You're not going to win them all, I suppose, but you fast forward now and say, okay, Cooper DeJean did not play against the Green Bay Packers in week 1. It's like, okay, you come out of the bye week, make the switch. Thankfully, no offense, but thankfully, Avonte Maddox go to the bench. Cooper DeJean, you start, and it's made all the difference in the world. What do you anticipate as we get into this Eagles-Packers preview from Cooper DeJean? How big of a difference will he make in the defense really as a whole for Fangio?
I mean, that's huge. I mean, ever since that bye week, it seemed like that was kind of the moment that Vic Fangio was able to flip the switch. And the only real main change that they made was inserting Cooper DeJean into the lineup. So those first 4 weeks, and obviously the Packers matchup, they were getting cooked throughout the air. You saw Jayden Reed kind of give them the business with 3 total touchdowns or whatever it was in week 1. And since then, he's kind of come back down to reality. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles handle him this time, especially with no Christian Watson for them, who was another injury that we didn't really mention earlier. But just since that bye week, the Eagles have allowed 15.9 points per game and just 251.5 total yards per game, which is just insane to say in the year now, 2025, with every offense being so explosive. But those are both the best marks in the NFL since that time. So the Eagles obviously have the best defense in the NFL, and Cooper DeJean's the driving force behind that unit right now.
Okay, so I got to ask, because we were talking about this before we recorded here, and there's an element of this where, I got family members that are Packers fans, and, there's some close proximity there and everything else. So maybe it makes it even more. But the fact that being on the Eagles side and cheering, rooting for the Birds, there's like a cautious optimism. There's some anxiety. There's some nervousness. It's like, well, are we going to be able to do it? Is there an opportunity here? If the roles were reversed, if I was a Packers fan, I know for sure I would be thinking the same thing, and probably to the extreme. Like, I'd be going, we got to go to Philly. We already lost to this team. They got better. Yes, we got better, but they got better. They got guys healthy. We just lost Christian Watson. So there's a number of things there. But, sometimes for some cautious, worried, anxious people like myself at times about my team, it's hard for me to fully get to that side. But we talked about this beforehand. What are some reasons, Eagles' strengths, some areas for the Eagles to be able to go in more confidently, fans to feel confident about this matchup and taking on the Packers?
So it just feels like you have to mention that first week that they matched up against, where Jalen Hurts had 3 turnovers and they were still able to win and put up 34 points. So that was a huge plus for them. And it feels like Jalen Hurts has been so much more efficient with the football since then that you can't see that happening again. So moving into this matchup this time around, obviously the injuries are a huge factor for the Packers, where the Eagles are kind of a lot more fortunate outside of the Brandon Graham injury. They're in a much better situation as far as injuries goes, because the Packers are down Jair Alexander that we mentioned, their most explosive receiver, and Christian Watson is out, and Jordan Love's a little banged up, whether we don't know the exact extent of it, but he's clearly dealing with something. So all of that plays into a fact. But as far as the players that will be on the field, I think we could see the Eagles feast on the slot corners, and they rotate Keyshawn Nixon and Javon Bullard into the slot. And ironically enough, in week 1, we saw A.J. Brown play his highest percentage of snaps, 32.5% in the slot. So not only will we see DeVonta Smith there, but we could see A.J. Brown receive a little bit more snaps in the slot and take advantage of those matchups there, especially with no Jair Alexander. They can really be able to move him around and kind of find these mismatches in the passing game. And then I guess Pro Football Focus loves Zach Tom, and they said he was a first-team All-Pro, and that was kind of controversial. But outside of actually left guard Elton Jenkins, everybody on their offensive line has allowed at least 3 sacks or more this season. So that's another area where the Eagles can kind of feast on their offensive line if they are able to have Jordan Love kind of hold the ball. He is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, kind of getting the ball away quickly and getting it to the check down and being a little safer. But if they can kind of lock up, play man-to-man coverage and keep those receivers honest, especially without the explosiveness of Christian Watson, I feel like we could see the Eagles, maybe your boy Nolan Smith, get another sack or two, and that'll help. So I mean, all of that factored in on top of Cooper DeJean's emergence, I feel like these are all factors that kind of play in the Eagles' strengths moving into this game.
You know that I love to hear that. Yes, absolutely. Let's get Nolan Smith. A multi-sack game, just a game record there. Absolutely going to happen. I don't know. We'll see. They need to go out there and prove it, obviously. But they got rested. Lots of guys not have to play a whole lot of snaps in Week 18. Should be good to go. We've said it, I think, a couple different times. But, having all 22 guys healthy going out there, it's a huge advantage on any single team. But you look around the league, especially in the playoffs, and it's like not very many teams can say that, and for good reason. So Eagles take advantage of it. There's a huge opportunity there. As far as any potential weaknesses, though, areas of concern, or I don't know if you go as far as saying concern, but just some potentials from what Green Bay may be able to take advantage from. Are there a couple there that you're eyeing?
So we talked about it to start with that whole Week 1 match and how things would be going this way. But the Eagles' running game versus the run defense, I know I said Saquon Barkley eclipsed 100 rushing yards in that first matchup, and they've kind of feasted on being able to free him and give him these lanes to work with before even being touched by a defender. He led the league. Well, the Eagles' run game in general on designed runs, they averaged 2 yards before contact per rushing attempt, which was the best mark in the league. But if you look on the flip side, Green Bay's defense allowed just 0.6 yards before contact per rush, which was one of the third lowest in the league. So this is kind of a strength versus a strength for both sides. So it'll be interesting to see how the Eagles handle Green Bay's run defense, especially with the inclusion of Rashawn Gary on the edge, who kind of gave them fits that first time around. He's just a bigger edge that's real physical, and now the presence of Edgerrin Cooper, who, similarly to Cooper DeJean, didn't play much in that first week, and now he's kind of been one of the best players for the Green Bay's defense. So the Cooper versus Cooper matchup, I know they won't play against each other, but they're both playing a huge role on their respective defenses. So Edgerrin Cooper is definitely a player to watch for, especially if the Eagles try to utilize the RPO, because he's kind of the guy that they could leave out there and say, hey, watch Jalen Hurts and take care of him, because he has the speed, the size, the athleticism to kind of stay with him and blow up those plays. And then the special teams aspect, I feel like, is something that you can't deny. I mean, Jake Elliott's struggles are very real at this point. And on the flip side, Brandon McManus is now the kicker, who he wasn't their kicker in the first week, but he's been basically automatic this season. He's only missed one field goal. He's made all his extra point kicks. And on the flip side, Jake Elliott is just 28 of 36 on field goals, and he has missed an extra point. So it's like you can't ignore it. I feel like it's one step forward, 2 steps back for Jake Elliott. He had that promising game, Week 17, where he handled kickoff duty the whole time, and then they kind of had him in and out. Braden Mann handled a few of the kickoffs. Then Jake Elliott handled a few of them. It was weird. It was odd to keep track of when I was at the game, but I think that played into a factor. And then Braden Mann himself, he had shanked the punt where they were able to return it. The Giants were able to return it and kind of flip the field. And then one of his kickoffs bounced out of bounds. So that's not like really what you want to see heading into the playoffs. It seems like they don't know who they want to utilize on kickoffs, and they don't know, like, they're trying to figure out what's wrong with Jake Elliott. And now you also have to account for Keyshawn Nixon, who I mentioned plays some in the slot for them, but he's also an explosive kick returner that averages 29.3 yards per return. So if they do start like that Washington game where they're letting them catch kickoffs at the 15, 20-yard line, it could be a long day, and the Packers could be starting with the ball in great field position. So between that and Green Bay's run defense, those are the keys that I would watch for.
Okay. Yeah, don't overthink it. Like that's where it feels like. Just please, Sirianni, Michael Clay, whoever's going to have the ultimate decision at the end of the day, like, get Jake Elliott out there, do the kickoffs. It's going to be a longer kickoff for one, but he's more conditioned to it. Let him get out there, feel the wind, see how the ball's moving, everything else. We've talked about it a number of times, but then, it's not going to hurt his field goal kicks. Let's just say that. So, I don't know. Whenever I'm reading or seeing a tweet from, I think it was Ed Cracks, maybe, he was like, oh, Jake Elliott missed a 33-yard field goal, but he did make the 35 and 37 afterward. I'm like, good, I suppose, but no, like, I don't need to be seeing or reading a 33-yard miss. I know that it happens occasionally, but given all that we know and see from Jake Elliott, I said this during my live stream as well. I'm like, look, if there's one thing I'm concerned about, there's one thing that I'm like, it could come back to bite us. It's the kicking game. It is special teams right now, in particular with what's going on with Jake Elliott, because the margin for error, the closer the games with these teams in the playoffs is like, if it comes down to a kick, yeah, I think that Jake Elliott can make a game-winning kick because he's clutch, but at the same time, like, there's a big element to it that's a very much unconcerned or disconcerting because of what we've seen in all the misses. It's
so weird because it felt like for so many years in a row that, like, whenever Jake Elliott was up to kick a field goal, it felt like it was almost like an extended commercial break because you're like, oh, he's going to make it. Even if it's 55 yards, just like he became automatic.
Oh,
Whereas
yeah.
this season, it's like you can't even leave the TV if it's like a 35-yarder. It's just like or even an extra point. It's just like it's so odd, and it feels like they found something in Week 17 where he was handling kickoff duty, and then he went 5 for 5 extra points. He made both of his field goals. Granted, they were shorter field goals, but then we saw him miss a 39-yard field goal in Week 18. I mean, granted, it was windy in that stadium. That specific goalpost was shaking at one point, but the wind was certainly a factor. But at the same time, like you mentioned, the margin for error is so small now. You're playing the best of the best, and that missed 3-point field goal could be the difference between winning or losing a game, or even a missed extra point. So the Eagles really need to figure out what's going on with Jake Elliott quick. And I know they're kind of running out of time, and you don't want to see them shuffling who's handling kickoff duty this late in the season, but hopefully they figure it out before they play the Packers.
I'm hopeful that they do. And you speaking of margin for error, there's also less margin for error now because we have gotten a lot of the first touchdown score predictions correctly. We did not last week, and so I know that people are, just a little bit upset. Not super, because we've gotten 4 or 5 weeks in a row, but it's time
wait,
to.
I did get 2 of the anytime touchdowns.
That
I said
is-
EJ Jenkins and Anaya Smith. So
I was going to say,
hopefully
yes.
They made their money back.
Yes, as long as you're taking all the picks that we thrown out there, then you should still be positive. Make sure to, gamble responsibly, of course. You're just throwing everything out. But yes, you did. I thought it was hilarious because I texted you as soon as it happened. Also, I was like, dang it. I said Johnny Wilson, but I was like super close to saying Anaya Smith, and I changed it, and I was like, nah, I should have. But, hindsight's 2020. However, it's time for redemption. It's a playoff game, big time moments. First touchdown score. Who are you going with?
So I mentioned Green Bay's kind of difficulty in defending the slot. So I'm going to go with, and I mentioned also that Jalen Hurts is going to be passing a little bit more often, I think, early. I think that'll be their plan. So I'm going to go with DeVonta Smith as the first touchdown scorer. He plays a majority of his snaps in the slot, and I think that could be a matchup that they attack, especially early in the game.
I like it. Okay. I'm going to go with Saquon. It is a very, very chalky pick. I know that, but the rested factor, the O-line, I do think it'll be a little bit more passing early on, but I think that once they get closer, it could be a very similar Brazil-type moment, whether it's a throw it to Saquon or just let him run it in. So I'm going to take Saquon, get that first touchdown score, get rolling. But either one, I don't care. The fact that we both have picked Eagles players, because sometimes it's like, oh, maybe pick the opposing team. I like that. Let's get a lead early. Let's take advantage, capitalize, get Green Bay kind of back on their heels, and then maybe a Jordan Love interception, and this whole thing snowballs. You texted me before a couple days ago, I think now, and I'm curious if this is your official prediction or what you're going to go with here, but score predictions, you did say you feel like there's a world, I'm paraphrasing here, but a world where maybe we have a blowout. Is that your official prediction, though?
So before I get to my official prediction, if I can, I just want to throw out one more guess of an anytime touchdown scorer, which is going to be from the Packers, unfortunately. But I'm going to go with Emmanuel Wilson, who's their RB2. He's scored a touchdown in 3 straight games, and he had 4 carries for 46 yards against the Eagles in Week 1. So if you do want a anytime touchdown guy, I'm just going to throw that out there. But going back to the score prediction, I'm still standing on what I said a couple of days ago. I think it's going to be a relatively convincing win for the Eagles, and I know there's a lot of worry about how close the Packers played them the first time and whatnot, but I do have the Eagles winning by two touchdowns. I have it Eagles 31, Packers 17.
Whoa, let's go. I love to hear that. I'm not that confident. I can't be. I don't know why. I really wish that I could. I think that we win, but man, if we get something like that, I'm going to be so rested and relaxed. By the fourth quarter, it's going to be phenomenal. I'm going to say I've been going back and forth. I think I said 27-21 on the Wednesday recording, and now I'm talking myself into maybe even a closer game. I shouldn't, I know, but I'm going to do it. Official prediction, I'm going to say Eagles win. It's more of a nail biter than we want, but the Eagles win 23-20, and Jake Elliott comes through clutch, baby. That's not a lot of confidence.
Or he missed a couple field goals.
And he might have missed a couple field goals, but he made the one that counted. So 23-20. That's what I'm going with. But everybody else, let us know your predictions down below. Appreciate you coming out during the stream. Thomas and I are going to be doing that as well. And also, shout out to Underdog, official sponsor of the channel. But if the Eagles win and you predict who the first touchdown scorer is, then you could potentially be winning tickets to the divisional round game in Philly. So good luck to all you guys. Anthony, appreciate your recording as always. I hope that you're correct in your prediction.
I hope so too. It'll be nice to have a stress-free Sunday, but we'll see what happens.
There you go. All right, we'll see you guys till next time. Go Birds.